Welcome back to the Rebuilt Parish podcast. On today's episode, we've got Kathy O'Leary, Creative Director at New Roads Catholic Community in Massachusetts. Now, Kathy has been working with Rebuilt for the last 10 years in her parish, and I'm so excited for you to hear the way she shares authentically about the things that her parish has tried, what it felt like going through the process, and sharing some of the wins that they have today. We'll see you inside the episode. Well, hey, Kathy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, Melissa, thank you so much for having me. So happy to talk with you today.
I'm excited. This is going to be good, especially because you have some extensive experience with Rebuilt, and I'm excited for everyone to hear all about you and the journey that you and your parish have had.
Thanks. I'm excited to share. And
Perfect.
I'm happy to talk to you too, because I feel like I get to hear your voice all the time with all things Rebuilt. And so it feels like this one-way relationship where I feel like I know you, but I'm excited to get to connect more. So.
I'm excited because I think the last time we got to talk in person was at the conference in June.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, this is exciting because we were talking with a lot of people at that time. You know, we were sharing the stage with, other priests, other leaders. And so this is nice because this is just the two of us talking. So we get to go a little more in depth here too.
Yeah, sounds great.
So to start us off, could you share just a little bit about yourself, your role at New Roads Catholic Community, and how you first got involved in parish ministry?
Sure. So first of all, I'm a wife and a mom of two kids, ages 7 and 10, and I serve at New Roads in Belmont, which is just outside of Boston, Massachusetts. And at New Roads, I serve as creative director, and I've been on staff here for, I think it's about 11 and a half years.
Wow.
Which is hard to believe. It feels like a long time in some ways, but also a short time. I like to say that I do a little bit of everything. That title, creative director, is not the most common title in a Catholic parish, but we kind of did it on purpose because really at the time, it was just about trying to find creative ways to reach out to people who have been disconnected from church. And so I kind of don't mind it because it's very open-ended and it's allowed me to get to work on a lot of different things in our parishes. So so that's my title. And my role really has to do with kind of three main things at this time. The first is working on our messages and message series with our pastor, which I love to do. I also work on our overall weekend experience, so helping manage the tech and worship ministries and what goes into the weekend experience. And then also just more generally, our adult ministries at New Roads.
Amazing. And Kathy, one thing that I'm sure we'll talk about, but it's really fun. You're not only on the message team and helping to craft them, but sometimes you're delivering them as well.
Yes, that's right. I'm very honored to get to do that. Very unusual kind of thing to get to experience, but grateful for the opportunity to do that. So, yeah.
That's one of those blessings of that creative director position, is that it can be any and everything. So tell us, how did you first get involved in parish ministry? How did you get connected with working for the church?
Yeah, I like to think that I've been involved in parish ministry since I was kind of going to a parish when I was younger. I mean, my family, I grew up in a Catholic family. We were always involved in our parish, and particularly my mom always served in our parish in some form. And I think my first experience of serving was after confirmation. I co-taught a CCD class at the time, which was really fun for first or second grade. And then I've always just kind of found a parish and served there no matter where in the country I was, or even at college. I joined the local parish because we didn't have a strong Catholic community where I went to school. And so, then when my husband and I moved to this area, we joined our local parish. And at the time, Father Tom, our pastor, was new here, and he and the leadership team were talking about some of these new ideas and changes. And there was a new pastoral plan in the Archdiocese of Boston. And so there was just some write-ups in the bulletin. And I was in the midst of a job transition and trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. I felt called to something different, but I didn't know what it was. I never saw myself working for the church or in a parish. It was not something I had really ever considered. But once we started coming here, I joined, I think it was the welcoming committee, like a kind of early hospitality type of community, just talking about like, how could we be more welcoming, and then there was this job opening for, I think it was assistant to the leadership team. And it was just kind of a catch-all, like help out kind of job. And I was like, I don't know that really is the best thing for me. But at the same time, I felt really inspired by what was going on here. And a big part of that for me was reading the book Rebuilt. They gave us, the leadership team at the time gave the people serving in these ministries Rebuilt to read. And so I just have such a clear memory of reading it.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Now, you joined then as an assistant to this leadership team, and you've gotten to be a part of so much change. And New Roads was one of the very first parishes that Rebuilt started coaching. Can you take us back to that time? Like, what led your team to seek out the coaching, and what were some of the challenges that you were facing at the time?
Yeah, it's interesting to think back through this history because actually, I think we didn't so much seek out coaching. I think more Rebuild approached us and was like, would you like to try this thing out? And we were like so honored. We're like, great, because we had read Rebuilt and we were so inspired and we were really pretty committed to trying to implement it as much as we could. But in the meanwhile, of course, we were running into challenges and needed support. And so I think some people from, again, this is like almost 10 years ago now, from the early days of Rebuilt, like came to observe on the weekend, and just having them come was so great because they came and, we were very aware of like how far we had to go still. Like we had been to Nativity and seen like, wow, this is incredible. And what we were doing felt like this much, but some of the team came here and they were like blown away by what we had done so far. And we were like, oh, is this good? Is this anything? Are we on the right track? And so it was so great to get that first kind of feedback and connection. And from that, they had approached us and said, would you be interested in doing some coaching? And it wasn't something we thought was even possible. Really, we didn't know about it. And we were very excited because, like I said, we were facing challenges. We needed support. And so it was exciting to have that opportunity.
That's incredible. And Kathy, you said something that really stuck out. And I think a lot of people can relate to this too, where you looked at Nativity and you got to go on campus and see it and talk to the team and see, whoa, look how far ahead they are. Look at all they've done. And you compare your parish with them. But when they came to see you, they were like, wow, look at how far you've come. Look what you've done already. Because sometimes, especially when we're working in a parish, we still see all that has to be done yet. Like we still see how far we have to go, but sometimes having them come on campus can be also very reassuring for you and observing and saying, you're doing great at this. Look at how well you've done this. And then they can also help you get through some of those obstacles too. Like, oh, this area could still use some help, but here's how we can walk with you through that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, having a fresh set of eyes on your weekend experience and your environment is just huge.
Amazing. Now, you mentioned a little bit about kind of what was going on with the Archdiocese of Boston at that time, where, it was that disciples and mission plan where parishes were combining. Can you talk us a little bit about that transition and talk to us about New Roads and kind of how that came to be?
Sure. Yeah, so in 2012, the Archdiocese of Boston adopted this new pastoral plan called Disciples in Mission. And the purpose was to strengthen parishes for the work of evangelization. And so it was this great goal, but it also didn't have a lot that was kind of set out in terms of what that might look like. But part of that plan structurally was grouping parishes in what they call collaboratives. And so New Roads is a collaborative, and we were in the first phase one of Disciples in Mission. I think there were maybe 10 or 11 collaboratives in that first phase. And the way a collaborative works is it's not the same as a merged parish. So we are two parishes, St. Joseph and St. Luke, but operating with one pastor, one parish staff, but the finances and the identities of the parishes remain distinct. And so, that's kind of how some of that started. But for us, I think it was a great opportunity because, like I said, the stated purpose of Disciples in Mission was to strengthen parishes for the work of evangelization. There was an awareness that we needed to do things differently, at least on some general broad level. And so actually the Archdiocese of Boston is the one who gave us the leaders, they gave us Rebuilt. They're like, here, read this, and they said, be bold, try new things. And so we were like, great. Like we read Rebuilt, we read some other books, and we were very excited about the opportunity. We really felt like we had been given some encouragement and permission to experiment.
Wow, Kathy, I wish every diocese out there going through these transitions would approach that the same way. Hand out those books, say, be bold, try new things, and that making disciples is the priority there. Because we know that there's so many parishes and so many dioceses that are going through this right now. And for some of them, it's really scary because they don't know what to do. They don't know what's next. But I love that that was the culture that your bishop and diocesan leadership brought to this of, hey, we're going to focus on making disciples. This isn't about closing parishes. This isn't about taking away any priests. It's about making disciples.
Yeah, I agree. I'm very grateful for that. And really, Rebuilt was such a big part of our story because I remember when I read Rebuilt, I had been just kind of a typical Catholic in the pews all my life. And I don't feel like I ever grew up hearing the words evangelization or discipleship.
Right?
It just was not a focus. It was not a thing. And so reading Rebuilt, I remember reading it at night and then staying up to finish it because it was just so compelling and it was shining a light on something that just felt so true to kind of what my own experience had been in different parishes, and realizing wow, yeah, we've lost our way because we've lost our why as a church.
Yes.
And it's interesting. I think when I think about what's been so powerful about Rebuilt and what the Archdiocese allowed us to kind of embrace is that reaching the lost as at the heart of what our parishes are supposed to do and supposed to be. And for me, it was kind of a personal change that happened first. Like when I read Rebuilt, I was like, whoa, this is amazing. But I also then, as I engaged in that, I think of it this way, Melissa, maybe you can relate because you have kids also. When you have your first and then you are going to have a second and you think, how am I ever going to love another kid so much? I already love my firstborn. How am I going to love another person so much? Because I just can't imagine that I would have enough room in my heart. And so then, of course, when I had my second, it just unlocks a new part of your heart that you didn't know was there. And you just love this person so fully. And when I read Rebuilt, it was like a similar experience because I felt like God unlocked this part of my own heart that was part of God's heart, which is a love for the lost. Yes. It's God's heart beats for people who don't know him. And it's I didn't even know that was within me, but it grew with me through reading Rebuilt and through, being given the permission to do things differently and to really think about what are we doing as a church? What's the point? Why do we exist? Yes. And it's to make disciples and to reach people who are lost. So.
Definitely. I mean, Kathy, I'm with you. I never thought about, I was cradle Catholic as well. I didn't read Rebuilt until 2017, and I had read The Purpose-Driven Life right before that. And I was like, oh, wait, my church doesn't do this. Oh, my church doesn't do this. And I almost left the Catholic Church until I saw a spot where Rick Warren said, if your church doesn't do these things, don't change churches. Change your church. And that was a light bulb moment. I had never thought to get involved or help in any way. And so I did. I joined pastoral council, and at one of the meetings, we had a brand new pastor coming in. At his first meeting, he handed out Rebuilt. And I'm reading this and I'm like, oh, yes, this makes sense. And I'm nodding and I'm highlighting and making notes. And I'm like, wow, I never thought about it like this before. I never thought about how we should be reaching the lost. And same thing, Kathy, it unlocked just a place in my heart for the lost that I didn't even know that I was missing that, right? I didn't know that was possible, but it was just so powerful. And I think so many other parish leaders out there can relate to this, that sometimes we do get lost because we forget our why. But when we go back to that it's about reaching the lost and helping them have that relationship with Christ, that everything changes.
Absolutely. And I think discovering too personally and then trying to lead in this way that, focusing on the lost is not at the expense of the found, so to speak.
Right.
that actually we all grow, and this is
Yes.
obviously just right out of the rebuilt playbook, but just experiencing that personally, that my faith has never been more alive than when I started focusing on helping other people discover faith and grow in faith. So,
Yes, because it helps you grow deeper as a disciple. You become closer to Christ. You become a better disciple when you are reaching the lost and sharing God's word. It's so beautiful. I mean, that's, I think, one of the mysteries that we'll never quite get a grasp of is how that works. But we just have to be thankful that we do get this opportunity. Now, talk
yeah.
to us a little bit about the name New Roads, because you mentioned that you are a collaborative of parishes. So, talk to us about how you came up with the name New Roads. Where did that come from?
Yeah, so the name New Roads comes from the words of Pope Francis, and I believe it was the first interview he gave after being elected Pope in 2013. One of the things he said is that the church can't simply be a place that has open doors. We have to be a church that goes out, that creates new roads to reach out to people who have quit church or become indifferent, because those that have left the church, they might be willing to return, but it takes audacity and courage and boldness in order to reach them. And so we were very inspired by Pope Francis's leadership, and I think getting to choose. And it's funny because sometimes people hear that our name is New Roads and they're like, that's not a Catholic church name. And we're like, well, it's the name of our collaborative. It gave us this freedom to pick a name, and we didn't even have to pick a name. We could have just been St. Joseph and St. Luke Collaborative. But again, we were looking at everything through the lens of evangelization and discipleship. And we said, what name could we choose that would signal to people that we're doing something different, and that would focus us around our mission. And so New Roads, became our name, and it's been a great opportunity to focus on us on our mission. There's a lot in there too that's really helpful. Even just that idea of framing our ministry as a journey. I love that perspective of our Catholic faith, that faith is a journey, and that's built into the idea of New Roads, right? It's a journey. But also the idea that, new is in our name. We like to say it's one of our team values. And so it's like, we're going to experiment. We're going to try new things because God is always doing something new, ever ancient, ever new. And so, I think just
Oh, I
helping
love
keep
that.
our default posture facing outward.
That is so good. I mean, when you think about, the mission is kind of built right into the name. I love that. And that one of your values is new. And it's clearly that you value that, and that, especially when I think about, again, that name, creative director, you're finding new and creative ways to make disciples and bring people back into the church. Just a fun way to get to connect with them through this new name. I love that.
Yeah.
Now, we know that parish renewal often requires both cultural and structural change. So, what are some of those biggest shifts that you've seen take place over the past 10 years in how your team thinks about ministry and reaching the people who are not coming to church?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a few that come to mind, some that are still kind of in process, I would say. But one of the first things I think about is how, when we used to work on our weekend experience and talk about the message, and we would say, the idea is think about there's someone new coming here every Sunday. And we would sometimes just look around and be like, is there anybody new here? I'm not sure anybody is new here, because the cultures of our parishes at the time they were very kind of static and stagnant, and it was not new people. And so now, we have new people coming every Sunday without a doubt. And so it's just great to have really seen that shift in reality, but also our perspective, because we decided we're even if they're not here, we just have to kind of pretend that they're here and hope that God will bring them here, and that did happen, but it took some time. And now we really do have, I feel like we've changed from that inward focus of, how can we serve the people who are here, to that outward focus of asking who isn't here, and how can we reach them and how can we engage them. So that's one that comes to mind. And then another one I would say is just in terms of the role of staff and leaders as, being the ones that are primarily doing the work of ministry. That's kind of how I thought of it initially. I think that's how a lot of parish staff people, it's like, we serve the people who come here, and that's how it works. But trying to shift over time to viewing staff and leaders as equipping people here to do the work of ministry, equipping the saints to do the work of ministry. And that still is a growing edge, because I'm a doer and I would very happily do all the things. But that is, first of all, limiting, leads to burnout, but also it's just not God's design
Right.
for us as disciples or for the church. And so, all the time trying to work on that, layers of leaders, as Nativity and Rebuilt talks about, and really trying to build up teams of people who are doing the work, and not just, being a parish staff who is doing all of the things because we can and we like to, but because, it's about building up the body of Christ and doing that together.
Absolutely. They get to be more fully engaged disciples when they're serving, and especially when they're serving within their gifts and talents. And how much better is your team and your parish, because you've got hundreds of lay people serving in their gifts and talents rather than just your staff trying to do it all.
Yeah, absolutely. And then another shift, I would say, again, this is one that's in progress, but I am by nature kind of like a kind of driven, hardworking person, which can be great. But at the same time, I can focus on that at the expense of allowing God to work, and feeling like it all depends on me and I have to control all of the things. And so it's been a shift from, thinking it all depends on our effort, to really opening up and seeing this as this is God's work. And it's a gift on both sides of the equation, because I think when things are going not so well, it gives the freedom to say, you know what, things aren't going well. It's God's work. I can't take the full blame or responsibility. I'm doing what God's called me to do. If someone's upset, I just can't take it personally, because I'm trying to be faithful to what God has called me, what God has called us to do. And then even on the positive side, when someone's like, oh God, wow, I really love this, or whatever it might be, or we see people taking steps, it's also and that's God too,
Exactly.
this is God's work. I just feel like it's a really healthy and helpful frame, but it can be hard for me to find that balance sometimes, because I can be prone to, taking, criticism personally, and not seeing the success and the wins that really God is bringing about, not my own effort, but that through the grace of God, He's growing our church, He's reaching people, and we're just invited to be a part of that and instruments of that.
So, Kathy, we've talked a little bit about coaching, and we know that it's a big investment of time and trust. Looking back, what are one or two tangible ways that Rebuilt's coaching made a difference in your parish, either in your leadership team, weekend experience, or overall engagement?
Yeah, coaching is a big investment. You're right, Melissa, of trust and time and all of that. I mean, I would say honestly, coaching has impacted everything that we do in a positive way. I guess the first thing that comes to mind is just thinking about aligning our leadership team around a clear mission. And so that was helpful in the earlier days, but also keeping us accountable. So setting goals and reviewing progress and making adjustments. I remember there was a particular time, I think it was just before COVID, and our attendance had grown. It was really exciting. We split our one mass that we were focusing on into two, and we needed to recruit a ton more ministers serving in order to support, kids programs and greeters at those two masses. And so we needed to do a call to serve. And I remember talking with Rebuilt about it. And one of the things that our coach said was, so what's your goal going to be? And I was like, oh, I never thought about a specific goal for the number of serve cards we would have returned. And I was kind of nervous to set a goal, because it was like, what if we don't reach it? So I threw some number out there, and then they said, well, that's great. What would be a reach goal? What would be a goal that you would be like, wow, God made that happen? Cause that's, and so we ended up setting 100 was our goal, which at the time, that was huge for us. And we got, I think it was 100 or 101 serve cards.
Whoa.
And it was so powerful, because it was let's set a goal. And then it was we're going to pray about that goal. We're going to tell people on our teams about that goal. And it was we just hadn't approached things that way. And, having the, direct feedback and advice, and this is how Nativity had done things. It's like, let's set a goal. Why wouldn't we do that? And why wouldn't we ask, pray God to make this happen? And then to see it happen was just awesome. And so that was, I remember, like an early coaching win. That was just like, wow, we wouldn't have thought about that on our own, but it made it so much more powerful.
Oh, I love that. And that was right there. You were able to clearly point to God for that was what you had prayed for. Amazing. I love that. Now, some parishes hear about the rebuilt model and they wonder if it can work in their context. There's some misconceptions that we're just trying to make mini nativities, which we are not at all. We know that Nativity is one parish, and there are thousands of parishes out there that have their own identity, and we want them to keep that identity. What was most helpful in your perspective about having an outside coaching relationship to keep your team focused and accountable?
Yeah, I think that having someone outside come in gives fresh eyes and even fresh language, just a fresh perspective to our experience, because every parish is different, Melissa. You're right. It really is. And at the same time, it can be really easy to kind of get bogged down in that, to have some blind spots, and to just default to like, well, this is how we've always done things. And this is how we've always used this space, or this is how we've always thought about sacramental preparation, And so coaching disrupted that in a really helpful way. And I think it also created this external sense of accountability. Like I said, I'm someone who by nature is kind of driven and I want to get things done. But at the same time, it was great to be as a team saying like, here's what we're working on together. And we know we're going to have to, talk about this with our coach and reflect back on this and set goals. And so it helped create momentum for our team.
I love that. That momentum is what then helps you go further faster. So I think that's a really important part of coaching, is that it can do that. Now, Oh, sorry, continue. Go ahead.
I would say also another piece of the coaching, which I love how, again, we had done an earlier iteration of coaching, but we're doing coaching now. And I appreciate how there's kind of the one-on-one coaching, but there's also a communal aspect built into the coaching with Rebuilt, which I think is so huge and so important because part of it for me, part of my experience doing this work is that it can feel very lonely. Like you can be trying to do this work, even though I have a great team here, it still can be hard. And like on a random Tuesday, when someone's upset about something, why don't you do this the way I want it done? And it's like, am I crazy? Is this crazy? And I remember I would put on the Rebuilt podcast like 10 years ago in a very earlier iteration, just to like listen to other people who were trying to do this work and not feel alone and be like, okay, I'm not crazy. This is about making disciples. It is about reaching the lost. I'm not the only one. Like these people might be in Baltimore, but like we're trying to do this together in some way. And so I think the community piece of coaching and being part of Rebuilt is just that value can't be overstated, because we need community in general, but like especially trying to implement change in our parishes. We need to know that we're not alone and we can learn from each other and just, be held up and supported by each other. This weekend's message was about Moses and his arms being held up by Aaron and Hur, and just talking about how this is how God designed us, for interdependence, not independence. And we need that. It's true for us personally, but also as parishes.
I always think about Rebuilt It and coaching when I hear that reading too, because it's one that we reference here. We reference that where Rebuilt helps you to build that leadership team to then be the Aaron and Hur holding up the arms of the pastor, because it does feel lonely in this parish work. And it's so nice being surrounded by that community, especially of other parishes all over the country and the world, knowing that they're all trying to do the same work. They're all focused on the same mission too. And I love learning from the other parishes too. I think that's one of the great wins about having the collaboration, is that all of these parishes are all learning from each other too.
Absolutely. I agree.
Now, as a collaborative parish with 2 worship sites, what have you learned about unifying people around one shared vision, especially when each community has its own history and traditions?
Yeah, another great question. And I would start off by saying that we certainly don't have all the answers here. I would say that, even though we are a collaborative, like I said, we're not actually a merged parish. So the parishes are distinct. And right now, we're not unified as a community in full in terms of if you come to one of our parishes on a Sunday, it's going to look pretty much like any other parish. And then the other parish is our more full expression of New Roads or of Rebuilt. And that evolved in a certain way. Initially, we had tried to do everything at both of our parishes, and it was just a recipe for burnout of staff and volunteers, and it was too much. And there was a lot of resistance. And so we said, okay, let's take a breath and think about what if we just focus on one mass at one of our parishes. And so we did that. And over time now, we built out a modern worship space at one of our sites. And, we also thought this would be a way to allow some people to be on, a little bit like a slower track and to be able to come see something when it was more fully formed versus we're trying to do things and it's hard to catch the vision. So now we have a place where you can come and see a place that's actually growing, that has tons of families and kids coming here. And so, yeah, we're still working through what that is like, but we don't have it figured out for sure.
Now, Kathy, let me ask you something. So I know that Father Tom preaches in a message series. Does he bring that same message from one worship site to another?
Yeah, so he does in the sense of he does the Saturday Vigil Mass at the other parish. And so he will do the message. He pretty much always celebrates that Mass. And then on Sunday mornings, he's at our other worship site. And so he can only be here because we have Mass at 9 and 11. The other Mass is at 10. So, not completely, but there is some. And actually, the Vigil Mass at the other worship site is the larger of the two Masses at that parish. And so there is some sense of, getting both the message at both sites.
So that's what we talk about, that one church, one message. And so by having that, you are helping to focus both worship sites on that mission, because the message always does point back to the mission.
Yes.
Now, Kathy, for our leaders out there who are listening, who might feel stuck or overwhelmed by decline or just anything else that's an obstacle in their way, what encouragement would you offer to them?
Yeah, well, stick with it. That would be my first encouragement. Don't give up. I think, there's a few things that come to mind, but the first is to persevere. And I think that part of that for me lately has been reflecting on, some of the influence that different people have had in my life. But, I think about like Tom Corcoran at Nativity, and he's been there for decades and he never saw himself, working in a parish, but here he is all these years later. And, God has used him to do amazing things there, and I think about how Tom's, commitment to his calling has impacted my life and therefore also like New Roads and what I get to lead here so powerfully. And I've tried to, I know Tom, I've tried to tell him some of these things, but the truth is he could never know the depth of what that impact has been. And then I think about that on a meta level, because I think it's true for all of us who work in parishes. Like I might pour my heart into a message and it might feel like, well, I don't know that reached anybody. I think it fell flat. But the truth is, God uses it. And so often, I think the work that we do in parishes is, there are things that God is doing. There's fruit that is being born that we don't know about. Someone might listen to a message on a podcast. They're never going to write us an email, but they encountered God through it. Right? Or they're now going to try going to their local parish because they heard a message that was for them. That was actually God was speaking to them through that. And so I think holding on to that truth that God is always multiplying what we give, and that, we're prophets of a future not our own, that prayer that's attributed to Oscar Romero, but, that the seeds that we plant now will bear fruit in ways that only God might see now. But I hope that we might see in the fullness of time. So that's a big piece of it for me.
That's a big one. I think that's a beautiful way to close, is to just share, persist, keep going, because we don't know something we say, something we do, something that we're helping to run in the parish that is impacting lives of people that we won't even know about. We won't know till we get to heaven and we see that crowd up there cheering us on and thanking us for the work we did on earth. So that's going to be a beautiful surprise when that day does happen. But it is beautiful to see that ripple effect that we might not get to see this side of heaven, but just know that you're continuing to make an impact. Well, Kathy,
Absolutely.
thank you so much for all that you're doing in your parish. Thank you for continuing to be a part of this rebuilt community. We're so grateful that you took the time to pour into our community today and share your story with us.
Thanks, Melissa. Thank you for your ministry at Rebuilt. Thank you for your ministry with Anchored with Purpose. I love listening to your own podcast. You're such a gift to the church and to us at New Road. So thank you for your ministry.
Thank you. I'm grateful that I get to do this work. And, it all goes back to God, right? We're all given our gifts and talents, and what a blessing that we're able to use those to help further the mission.
Absolutely.
Well, Kathy, thank you again for joining us. And to our listeners, we will see you next time.